it feels like there was some recovery this year. I think that this year definitely feels a little better than last year, but also everything I do feels just like, oh my God, like that, I feel like this career is like you're jumping out of an airplane, less of like a climbing the mountain career and more like you're falling out of an airplane a la Fortnite and you're trying to like grab onto parachutes that keep like ripping. So you like grab a parachute, like, oh, I'm floating, and then it like rips when the job's over, and then you're like, oh, I'm falling again. Oh, and then there's another one. So in every job, you're like, wow, if I didn't catch that parachute on the fall down, it was
Yeah.
gonna you're gonna get,
I thought the ripping was like a movie falling apart, but like that's the
no, that's just the end of the job.
end of the job. So it's constantly falling. Do you think that's going to be a constant through your career, or will you ever get comfortable?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully not, but I'm prepared. I feel
Hopefully
like I
not.
had a mentorship through the local 600 with AFI alum as well, but much further in their career and works with some amazing directors.
Can you say who?
It was Peter Deming
Oh, wow. Yeah.
who works with, yeah,
David Lynch and yeah.
yes, and many, many. He shot The Menu recently, and amazing, yeah,
Yeah.
and super
Yeah.
kind soul. And it wasn't in the same way, but it's also the same, the bumps, and things are slow and things are falling apart, and you know it's I think that's name of the game for cinematographers, at least, maybe. I
Yeah.
think you catch runs of gold where you hit a streak, and then you're not always, it's like very hard to be like super top um you know all the time. So
Sure. Yeah. But also it takes time to make a movie. I mean, I'm always impressed by your your productivity, right? You've done so much in to me it feels like what feels like a very short amount of time. To you, it's probably like I wish I was doing more, right? But I
thank
feel
you.
like it's that mentality that you have, right, when you're starting out of just shoot, right? Just shoot as much as you can, just take as many jobs as come through, right? Don't don't judge stuff, like say yes to everything. You tell me. Was that your mentality?
Yeah, I mean, I think it still is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just I wasn't sometimes I think like, oh, I wish I could be more like, is this in line with my aesthetic purposes? I didn't choose that path, or wasn't able to choose that path, so it was much more like go out there and just get it, whichever way. Although I was thinking about it today, and I'm like, I'm not sure how I get jobs really at all. Like it really, I don't know, but I have
Yeah. What
been.
is the if someone said as a young cinematographer asks you that advice, what do you say?
I mean, I think looking back, film school was a great opening. Um, but I kind of, I guess my generation, I didn't go straight into it from undergrad, so. But I did find film during undergrad. I just started shooting stuff. And I think just having, which I think is pretty standard now, like everyone edits their own TikTok videos. But it wasn't so standard where you just get a camera, download footage, cut it, put music on it, do
Yeah.
something with it, get it out, do that again,
Yeah.
um, on DV and stuff. But now that's pretty standard. So I think having a pretty well-rounded just ability to help in every stage of a film, is something that helps. And I think you bring that to set, even though now I'm much more, a specialist as a cinematographer. Um, that's kind of the background, just like, hey, oh, there's some VFX problems. Like I've done some VFX, like I can help out on that. And yeah, and then, your friend circle grows, I guess, and shrinks and grows again. And I don't know.
Yeah. I always
um,
think that because you're talking about editing, like that's one of the most important things. Like when you're starting out and you don't know anything about like filmmaking really, editing's the best kind of across the board. You learn the most. It will the lessons you learn in that will stick with you no matter where you go in the industry. Because you learn like you learn story, you learn how you can manipulate performance. You can learn how you can save things. You learn like pacing, you learn rhythm. Uh, I'm glad you said editing. I love it as like across the board, and
Yeah.
then you find your thing, cinematography or whatever. What was, yeah, what was pre grad school, let's say, we'll call that your film school. What was
Hmm.
pre, like, what, when you were going into college, what were you like, I'm going to be a what?
How far back do we go? Well, I was born.
like past,
So
I want to be a cowboy or a spaceman.
right, right. I had a very different upbringing to most people, and I lived sort of my majority of my teen years was in India, like the country India,
Yeah.
and um,
Wait, why
I
is
was in
that?
love what's that?
Why?
Why? My parents were sort of like Hindu missionaries
Mm,
that like from the 70s, like hippies,
yeah.
and they were just like, we're doing this alternative lifestyle thing, and I was sort of raised in that, and we traveled a lot. We didn't have a TV. That was like one of the chagrins of my life, that everyone was watching MTV and Michael Jackson, and I was like trying to sneak over to their house and watch it.
Yeah.
Um, but like luckily I watched, like Indiana Jones at a friend's house that I just remember blowing my mind. Terminator 2 on some VHS at some kid's house, when
Oh
I was
yeah.
8, and
Yeah.
I was just like, holy moly. So the deep love for movies was there. And then
That's
in
crazy
India,
to think, like, no input, like almost zero TV, and then go into either one of those, Indiana Jones or Terminator 2, being one of your first experiences.
yeah.
Like, most of us grew up with some form of,
Totally. I
we kind of
mean, I
got it. We
watched
got,
cartoons and things and
yeah.
and like the Disney cartoons, but yeah, when I sort of yeah, it was great. I mean, the first movie I remember going to see in a theater, I was 13, was Jurassic Park. Like
Oh my
luckily.
God. Yeah.
I was like, I have
Jeez.
to go see this, and I, like made my mother take me.
Yeah.
But luckily, like as I started becoming a teenager, they let me start watching movies, and we did get like a TV in India, and I would go to Calcutta and go to movie theaters. There were like these old British Raj theaters with triple balcony, and just watch whatever came out. Um,
That's cool.
it was like 6 or 8 months later in than America, but still, I remember the posters for The Matrix, and I was like, this is going to be the best movie ever. And to me, it was at 16. I was just like, this is like incredible. Didn't and India has Bollywood, and like Bollywood is, at least then and probably still, it's not it's not just like, oh, that's movies. It's like the music industry, the whole culture is Bollywood. Like everywhere you looked, there were posters. The music from the latest movie is like the hit song. It's like Lady Gaga, but it's the movie. Um, and so that was there. I didn't necessarily love Bollywood movies at the time, but movies were this power, I think, that and like a cultural currency that was just very strong. And I feel like I had some ideas of like making movies would be the coolest, like the best job ever, but it didn't really click. Long story, I moved back to America. I finally like convinced my parents to buy a little mini DV camera, and I started shooting. I like somehow through a friend, I was doing computer programming, and through a friend was like, "Hey, I'm part of this car group." And I was like, "Well, I like Fast and Furious, so like I'll come out and hang out." Took my camera, started filming guys doing donuts and, in some parking lot. Went home, downloaded some music, put it on, like somehow got my hands on editing software, and sort of made a video pre-YouTube. I think YouTube hadn't been bought by Google then, like early days.
Yeah.
People from the little car club were like, "Oh, this is amazing. You should come
Oh,
out with
you
us."
blew their minds, right? They're like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Like, wow, we're all movie stars now.
Yeah. It's like I'm Vin Diesel. Yeah.
And that actually became like a little business. And we did, a few of us who were interested, we all kind of pooled energies together, and we made some like straight to DVD feature documentaries, feature length car porn, like just, car videos, kind of like
A feature
Jackass
length of just cars doing donuts.
little storyline, little like vignettes, and sort of a
Yeah.
through line. There was like actually like a DVD we put together that actually had like kind of a storyline and
Hmm.
character, sort of Super Troopers meets reality TV
Oh,
uh,
nice.
in northern Florida. So we sold those on our website and shipped them out, and I think we sold like 5,000 copies, and it was successful in the sense of
Wow.
like,
That's real. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
super cool.
There was a few other companies that we were like, we want to become them. I also saw like some horrific car accidents and other things, and I was like, I don't know if
Mm.
I want to give my life to this part of this, but I want to like go into film. Uh,
Yeah.
and so through a friend, I got
Wait,
an in.
what was one of the titles of one of those DVDs? Because I want to see if I can dig it up at some point.
Oh gosh, one of them was called Vehicular Lunatics. It shows the quality.
They're lunatics.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure it's very accurate to what the story is. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's a, anyways, it's a
Okay. We'll track that
time of
down
my life. I was
in the
19.
dark web.
Yeah, no, it's probably on the light web too. It's
Oh,
out there.
okay. Okay.
Um, but I got an internship in DC at a production company that did History Channel shows. Um, and went up there and immediately I was like, oh, I've never seen edit bays. I've never seen people working in conjunction with each other and
Yeah.
recreation shoots and a gaffer or like any of that stuff. And I was kind of on the producer track and sort of going into associate producing like that, like, but in editing or in documentary, there's the idea of like a predator who's like a producer, editor,
Yeah.
shooter sometimes. And that was sort of, I think, where what I had been sort of doing and where I was going. Um, Long story short, I kind of got burnt out on that. I ended up just doing spreadsheets. Um,
That's
and
real producing. Yeah.
yeah, which I still do a lot of spreadsheets.
Yeah.
But uh, there was actually the AFI Theater in Maryland, in
Oh,
Silver
yeah.
Spring,
Silver
and
Spring.
I watched some movies there, and I think I probably picked up a flyer and was like, oh, the AFI Conservatory, like interesting, just somewhere there. Um, I actually left film and had like got into the music industry a little bit, and
On which
um,
end of it? Like producing it or performing?
like record label producing,
Okay.
band management kind of thing, traveled a bit.
Yeah.
And after a few years of that, was feeling like that also wasn't where I wanted to be. And decided, I think I ended up doing a music video for one of the bands and looked down at the coffee table of this like stage that we had rented. Like I was kind of like pulling from all this time I had spent in DC. I had no idea what I was doing, but shot this music video in a stage. And I saw American Cinematographer on the table and I like flipped through it and I was like, oh my God, like they're showing the magic tricks here, like in this magazine. Like here's all the stuff I've been trying to figure out. Um,
It's pretty
I
cool.
subscribed to American Cinematographer and
Oh, nice.
started reading that, like, looking up like what is this gel number? What is this film stock? And it's like that was at the time where like digital, like Alexa wasn't out. I remember the article, like the first movie shot on Alexa, like it was early time digital transferring, from film.
Like the PD 150, the Panasonic.
It was more like the Thompson Viper. I don't know.
Oh,
That's what they
yeah.
were
Yeah. I
talking
remember
about.
that.
And there
Yeah.
was like the Panasonic Genesis or
Right.
Panavision Genesis and stuff. Um, and yeah, it's so beyond my thing. But happenstance, one person I met through the music industry thing was also a film director, and like coincidentally was like, "Hey, I'm shooting this movie in Johannesburg. I know you want to like be in film. Would you want to come work on the camera department on this movie? We're shooting 35 millimeter anamorphic." And
Cool.
I was like, yeah, I'll be there. And so I quit my record label job. I knew what I was walking into. I knew it was like a must hire. And I had no qualification for this. I read, I was like, I did search YouTube, but there's like so little videos out there about like film cameras or any, I mean, that stuff wasn't out there yet.
What was your role? Did you know what you
I
were being
was
hired to do?
I was hired to be an operator.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This movie was that the cameras were all in a car. Like every camera was a mounted camera in a car, so it wasn't really operating.
Right.
It was sort of positioning cameras. But I still knew I was like way out of my league. Even though I had done some music videos and all this other shooting, yeah, I knew like, I had enough sense of that. I get to South Africa, it's blowing my mind. It's like 5 days of prep. Luckily, the loader was kind to like show me how to load film. And I mean, definitely the shoot was 7 weeks. And I think that of all the years of film school I've done since then, that was like the most educational 7 weeks ever.
Wow.
Um,
Of doing
and
it out in the field. Yeah.
yeah,
Did anyone ever like figure out like, hey, this kid doesn't have any experience?
Yeah. By week one, there was another operator brought in.
Oh,
There was a 5 camera shoot, and there was only the DP and me. So they did bring like an experienced DP operator. So I
okay.
became like the C camera operator slash second AC. It was a very liquid, fluid sort of scenario. Luckily, like kept my head down, and yeah. On that shoot though, I was like, oh, this is what a DP does. You know, like
Mhm.
the gear and the know-how and the huge crew and just moving it forward. And
Yeah.
I think there I was like, okay, I probably should get a degree in this because, you know, I'm not qualified to do what I'm doing, and I'm definitely not qualified to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um, so I think on that during that time there, I was like, it seemed like the best was AFI for cinematography, and I wanted to go, and that's what I was going to do when I got back to America.
Nice. You dug up
Um,
that old flyer that you found at the theater and
I had done a little more research by then, but
yeah.
yeah. Um,
I got
and
a quick
so,
aside though. You were talking about the American Cinematographer magazines. When Paul Thomas Anderson was here with Licorice Pizza, and we put him in the green room in the library with all the room with all the scripts and stuff. And you probably know we have all these old
mhm.
American Cinematographer magazines in there. I've never seen anyone geek out more over that. He saw those and he was like, "Oh my god!" And he started pulling them out and looking up old articles, and he was like, "This is my favorite thing." And it was really cool, because I mean, he's such a camera nerd, and
Mhm.
to the point where then he followed up and he asked if he could borrow some of those, and we let
Oh,
him
wow.
borrow a whole bunch. Yeah,
Wow.
because those are the ones in the library you're not allowed to take out. But when you're
Right,
Paul
right.
Thomas Anderson, you get different rules.
It is a trove. I mean, I think cinematographers don't hold back. It's not like, oh, well, I had a special sauce. They're like, no, then I did this, this, and this, and then
Yeah,
that's how I did this. And it is like it's the instructions to doing the magic, I think. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it is the physical making of the film. I think a lot of the departments, it's from feel or from, you just hard to tell like how did you direct someone? It's like, well, they brought some stuff and I brought some ideas and but
yeah. You're right.
you're like, okay, this is this was the story, this is how we approached it. I want to do this. We like built this huge thing and did this thing. Um,
Yeah, I love I used to love also the visual effects. It was kind of a magazine, but it was kind of
mhm.
also like a booklet. I forgot what it was called, but like how they pulled off, especially when they were doing a lot more practical effects.
Right.
Just yeah, peeking behind the curtain is always great. To me, the most boring is actor interviews. Like, okay, what? How much can you talk about that part, right? But
Not necessarily. I mean, I think actors have a great like story reading. I think that that's really super interesting with actors is like how they approach the story and character. Yeah.
yeah, but I think at a certain point, like even I think some of the best actors don't even know how they do it, right?
True.
So I mean, yeah, of course I read those interviews too, and I love watching them because they got charisma. But to me, like the actual like practical things you learn from looking at like American Cinematographer is like that's great. That's learning the magic tricks, right?
Right. Yeah.
You,
Um,
you apply to AFI, you get in first try.
well, I put together the entire thing, real letters of recommendation, the whole thing.
Yeah,
And the kind of dirty secret is that I never finished a 4 year degree because I was doing computer programming, and but I did 2 years of that, and then by the time it kind of came to making the jump to complete the 4 years, I was already doing those car videos, and I'm like, I don't want to sit in a cubicle. I'm not like talented at programming. I'm just gonna pursue this film stuff. It was kind of opening up. We were traveling. It was fun. And
yeah,
so I didn't, and people who I had met were like, if you have it, if you want to be a producer, like you don't really need to do this. Um, and so I didn't finish a 4 year degree. And so I was looking at AFI and on, the financial side of AFI, it was like, I read some line, it was like, if you're coming only for a certificate, and that's the cool thing about AFI is like, you don't have to have a 2 year or 4 year degree to do the master's program. You can do the certificate and, same program.
yeah.
Um, but there was some, the deep in there was like, you're not going to get federal funding, like federal loans
Oh, right. I
if
forgot about that part. Yeah,
you're
yeah,
not doing the MFA. And I somehow read that as you're not going to get loans. I didn't like put together that there's the federal and then there's private loans.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
was like, well, I can't do that. So I better just finish a 4-year degree. Um, and so I looked into it and I ended up going to Brooklyn College in New York. I was living in New
Oh,
York at the time. And I'm really glad I did, even though later on I realized like, oh, I probably could have still gone or like applied at least.
yeah.
But I went to Brooklyn College. I met a lot of amazing people there. I got to shoot a bunch of thesis films, undergrad thesis films there. I was shooting a lot of music videos at the time as well with a good friend that I made in New York. Um, and I think, those 2 years of finishing that degree, you know, I don't know if they still do, but like day two of AFI, it's real day. And you kind
They
of have to show
don't,
up
and it makes me
every
mad.
week.
It makes me sad they don't do it.
They don't do it anymore.
No, no, they thought it took up, taking away a full day on the calendar when, they need to do another safety meeting was more important. But,
Oh,
that's my opinion.
that sucks. That was, I
Yeah.
mean, that's like, the iron in the fire, like right there. I mean, when we came in, it was like day two, you sit in the theater for a day and just watch every single person's reel and the 128 kids that are there, people,
Yeah.
um, from the writers to the directors, the production designers, everybody. And people were taking notes. I mean, it was hardcore.
It was hardcore. And by the end of the day, you knew a little bit about everyone in your class through their
Yeah.
work. And you've been
Yeah.
talking to each other in the breaks. And it's just like it bonded everybody.
Bonded or also made you just like, oh my God, what have I done?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. The
But
imposter
it,
syndrome gets cranked up. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that sort of, yeah, you're sort of placed or ranked. I mean, it's hardcore, but it is similar to the way it is out there, like where you are ranked and placed against other people,
Yeah.
you know, in whatever you're pursuing. So,
You're
uh,
right. It very quickly mimics the real world in that it's like people see your work, right? They make a judgment and then they talk to you and then they make other judgments, right?
yeah,
Like that's how it works, right? They see your work and okay, bring them in for an interview and then you interview.
yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
anyway, and yeah, so I at least walked in with some, decent looking music videos and a little bit of narrative and stuff, and I think that
Yeah.
really allowed like yeah, it was a good run at AFI, just working with a lot of different people, and then after AFI, a lot of people from my class I worked with. So
Yeah. So your real day reel was like a reel like of a bunch of different stuff.
yeah, it was like a cut reel of
Yeah.
music videos, and I think I also used it to apply to AFI. So
Ah.
part of that I think getting in and yeah,
Do you remember what song you cut to?
oof, yeah,
The song is
probably something from Bonobo, but I don't know.
okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
I don't know. Yeah, I probably
Cool.
have that reel somewhere.
So talk
Uh,
about those first days at AFI because it can be overwhelming. Sounds like you had a lot of experience, but especially when you go through a real day thing and you see everyone else, there's like you can't control it, but there is this competition almost built in. You're comparing yourself to other people. What was going through your mind? How were you adjusting to it?
Yeah, I mean it was intense. I think I had there's a competition aspect. There's like meeting just 100 people, um, and sort of no one knows what they're really facing. Some people know a little more, some people know less. There was a few. I luckily had come out in person to the interview, and I had
Mm,
met a few of I guess what we would call the second years.
yeah,
And so I had some idea, and it was definitely a much different experience than Brooklyn College undergrad. And I think almost any other college out there, it's, AFI is a really like a tight ship, and you have to take your seat and start rowing
yeah,
fast.
yeah. You're part of the
Drum is
machine
beating.
instantly. Yeah, you cannot you can't hide in the back.
No, I mean, it's like that, it was like real day on day two. And then people were teaming up for boot camp. You had to put together a shoot and find crew. And I think I'd never done that much like crew outreach and
Hmm.
just yeah, it was wild. And
Yeah, and then
and
you like those all those little decisions. You look back now, they're like little decisions, but at the time they feel life changing. You're like, should I team with this director? What's he gonna say about the rest of my life?
no, totally. I also moved, came to AFI. My wife was pregnant,
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
not
right.
by
You,
accident, but it was like, yeah, that we were like, okay, like I don't know what we were thinking. We were naive, but
yeah, that's another
that
big
was,
adjustment because like talk about the time commitment of school
oh yeah. I mean, I think
of this
that
school.
first semester I had calculated there was a half a day off a week where you weren't like, that's what it was when we were there. I mean, it was because the cycle one, everyone had 4 days to shoot it instead of the
Mm,
normal three. And so
yeah,
then it was 3 days of classes and 4 days of crewing.
that is
And
brutal.
then it was like a half
How
a
did
week
your
off.
wife like that?
She was an amazing sport. So I mean,
Good.
I think we were both young enough that we took the austerity knee at that, but yeah, so I had a son during cycle one. And because of that, I also had stipulations of like I had to team with someone early who was shooting
Yeah,
early. Um, and so anyways, it was crazy. It worked out
that is a lot. Like I don't know if I know anyone that's come through and done that like in cycle one because it's so early on. Maybe in
in cycle one.
second
Yeah.
year, but
Britton, my friend, he
Braden
had
Foster, yeah,
he had a child before AFI started, but yeah, he
yeah,
he was the other dad in the class. So we kind of bonded from that. Um,
yeah. And
it was
it,
wild.
I
Yeah.
mean, you are working that much, and like some of those classes are like 9 hours. There is a social aspect to AFI, but it doesn't. It's not like undergrad. It's not like frat parties or anything like that. But did you feel there was a part of it that you were like, oh, I can't do that because I have a newborn?
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean there's a social aspect. There was different groups of people who would hang out in different, ways, and I
yeah,
would kind of just go home.
yeah.
Uh,
I always
and
think that the people though that like yourself that had those commitments, or even if people that come in, later in life and they're older, they get way more out of it because they're taking it so seriously. There's some people that come here straight from undergrad or skip
Mhm.
undergrad
Right.
really young, and it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna try this.
Yeah. No, no, it was the sacrifice was so high that I was like, yeah, I was like very freaked out. I think, and just I remember that first semester especially, I was like anytime there was an assignment that day I was try to like start or finish that assignment, even if there was a week to go, because I was like, I just need to finish as
Yeah,
quickly as possible so I don't have this pending over me because like this baby might come at any time. And then once the baby was born, it was just kind of like I just need to finish it so I have some time free and like I'm
yeah,
chilled and not having this like pending, like, oh my God, I got to do an overnighter to this, you know,
right.
for
Yeah, for
to
you,
finish.
like getting ahead was actually just keeping up.
Yeah. And it helped me though. And I think I've tried to keep that actually through work. Like it's the quicker I have a theory that like the faster you can get things in place and done, the more space like you have for the universe to give you more work. Like if you
Yeah,
delay things, then you have like a big mess. Like work won't find you somehow. But if you kind of like get the work done, like even if it's
yeah,
like 3 weeks out or 2 months out, like start lining up stuff, do as much as you can, as quickly as you can.
yeah.
Then like another project is like, hey, a commercial comes up like in between something. You're like, yeah, I can do it because I've already done the prep on that.
That's so smart. I don't think I've heard anyone say it like that or say that. But you're right. Like a lot of times people won't even consider you because they think that you're busy doing something. Or you won't go after something because you're stretching out a job, right? But if you get it done, yeah, you have time to do things like that. You also, if you get it done, you have time to ideate on it and create more, be creative within that project. And yeah, it's like either way, the work's got to get done. So you might as well get it done.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, truly. And when you do it too early, though, you start to forget things. So you do have to make a system of really keeping track of things,
Mm,
which is also helpful though, because you know, um, having that, I don't know how many times it's like, what do we do there? Like, what were those? Like, what was that? And you just have a system like, oh, I can go to this place and like find out like what the camera settings were on that job or the
yeah.
lenses or whatever. I mean, because after a while, you start to have so many jobs that
Oh
are
yeah.
happening. It's like,
Oh, I didn't even think of that. So you
yeah,
you keep like spreadsheets for all your projects?
yeah, yeah, fully like gear lists, everything in like a big sort of binder spreadsheet.
And can you go to a specific day and like know what lens you shot a scene on?
Eh, I mean, usually you're renting lenses per like,
Hmm.
um, you take the lenses out for the movie or for the show or something. But yeah, I mean, I don't like
Right.
it's not so tracked where it's like camera reports, but I would see if I had like a specialty call in, like, oh, we use a special zoom lens for something or whatever. It
Yeah.
would hopefully if I've done my job. But
That's great though. That's good to know that you have that
yeah.
accessible, you know. Again, going to your like productivity and looking at your IMDb, it shows, it shows that that system works.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. And it's not just quantity, it's like quality. I've seen a lot of your stuff.
Oh, thank you.
But let's stay in film school for a second. Let's just talk about that first year. Was there ever like a big mistake you made that was a learning opportunity?
Mm.
And it could
Mm.
be like technical, it could be collaborative.
Mm. I mean, I think during the time I felt like there was a lot of mistakes made. Um, but I
That's
don't
why I
think
wanted to talk to you today. Yeah.
a massive mistake. I will say, um, it's just really valuable to be like really nice. And sometimes I can get a little straightforward, let's say. But it's if you're going to film school, every person, like you just never know who you're with, how they're seeing you, and what the future holds. And so I know there's a pressure to kind of make your mark there, but there's also like a great value of just, you know, serving as much as possible different
Yeah.
people, bringing as much as much as you can to help everyone along and just being really nice. I mean, collaborations that I've had after school have come from really left field, like people that I didn't hang out with in my class. So yeah,
But from your class, like knowing your reputation.
from my class, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what was the biggest learning curve
So
as far as like, just the art and craft of cinematography?
so I think, going when I applied to AFI, I was hoping to get, very technical lighting skills. I thought that that's like what, I think when you read American Cinematographer, a lot of the conversation there is like how they did this huge lighting setup that, with like 56 18Ks and a crane or something. You're just like, oh, I've never seen an 18K on set in my life. And
Right.
uh, things like that. And a lot of the things that look great in those photos are these huge lighting setups. And I thought, okay, great. I'm gonna like go in and know all this lighting gear and like learn all these lighting tricks. And then day one, they're like, this is about story, um, which was great. You know, it's like the
Yeah.
perfect thing. You don't necessarily need to know every flavor of what kind of 8 by rag you can do. And there is that stuff. I mean, exposure to the gear is there for sure. But I think that like, I did the math and it's like 90 cycle films in the first year.
Yeah.
Sitting there kind of knowing, while people are working on scripts, hearing about like, oh, what's your project? Oh, what's your project? Then like seeing how they change and like when they shoot, maybe you're on set, maybe you heard stories, and then screening them, discussing them,
Yeah.
and then dilling them.
Dill
Like,
dill dissecting them with a knife. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but that's story. Like that
Yeah.
pushes story and where you're sitting there. And I think that what that did was when I read a script, it made me, I remember like clearly reading scripts at Brooklyn College and just not knowing if they're good or not. Like I just didn't know what I was reading. I was like, okay, like I see that all the stuff's happening. Is it good? I can't tell. Like I had
Yeah.
no idea of like what pacing would sound like or read like. And, just it was tough to tell. And I think after that first year, it's much more clear. And
Yeah.
I've seen people kind of failing or like stories, there's a lot of films where by the time the climax happens, you're like, I wish the climax was just the beginning. Like, I wish we just jumped into the climax scene and then like what would happen? Like it would be turned up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I think that first year, that story, the grasp of story and what works and what's boring or what's not, that's
Right.
the biggest takeaway.
That's great. Yeah. That's smart. learning like how to, yeah, like you said, identify it, like on the page, uh, dissect it when you see a finished piece. And then the other part is like how to articulate it, right? How to talk about it, like narrative workshop, or I'm sure in your cinematography classes, you know, getting feedback because, different people deal with it differently. Sometimes it's really hard and new, but giving it, right?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
giving notes to a director. Was that ever a challenge for you?
Hmm. I mean, I think we had some really definitely in cycles. There was some good collaborations that like I did feel like brought in. Yeah, we discussed the story. I think there was a technique that someone or probably many people were talking about of just asking questions about the script to your
Hmm.
director. Like
Yeah.
instead of challenging or giving ideas, it's just like questioning, like, is this really XX, like whatever the questions would be, but just asking like, oh, like what about this? And what are they thinking here? And then I think I would ask like, is this the best we can do? Like, is this the
That
most
is
we
pretty
can do?
challenging, actually.
You
Yeah.
know? And I think like eventually, teaming up with Santi and the thesis that we shot, there was a really good collaboration on the script and just, really discussing the story and, discussing news articles and just so many things about like really getting to that world. And, he put out that story, but I think it was definitely a different script when we teamed compared to when we shot.
And you think that that's because of conversations you and other people were having with him about that?
Yeah, I think our whole team, we really sat and he was open to having conversations that were
That's a big part of it. The writer has to be open to it.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you work with Santiago in first year?
No,
Okay.
funny enough. Yeah. I didn't follow the advice. There was like a big Mexican standoff my year of teaming for thesis of just
Really?
like people had their eye on like certain, I think I wanted to team with Nasos, who's an amazing director,
Yeah.
good Santi. Um, but he wanted to team with someone else, and that person was waiting to hear from someone else, and that person was waiting to hear back from someone. It was like this whole like half the class was like doing this Mexican standoff thing. Um,
That's funny.
and then as soon as like one person made their decision, like the cards collapsed,
Yeah.
and I was sort of didn't get my seat on the musical chairs. And luckily, uh, my friend Yoni had read Santi's script and was like, "Oh, it's a good script. You should team for that story." Which is like a lot. I guess the rumor is never team for the story, only team for the team because it's always going to
Because it's going
change.
to change. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I didn't follow that, and I went for the story because I thought that it was a good story. And I think if someone has a good story, that's showing of their sensibility.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly. And it worked out. I mean, obviously you and Santiago have a great relationship since you shot a feature with him as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and he's a great friend, and so yeah, that was super great and
So
super
when
fun.
you're going into second year or you're in second year, are you thinking, and you probably were because you were in a different place in life, you have kid and everything. Are you thinking of like how you're gonna do your next steps to start your career or what they were, what the plan was?
Um, it's pretty blurry. You're pretty busy at AFI. I think my like steps for a career. I think it was just all like pour as much as you can um into your thesis
Yeah.
and survive that second year financially were my like two biggest concerns. I think I was crewing, for money like as a grip or an electric where I
During your
could.
second year?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
It's a lot to take
There
on.
was a
Yeah.
little circle of us who were also driving Uber to just
Really?
yeah,
You're one of them?
yeah.
No
I didn't
way.
do that much, but there was some ladies in my class who were doing it. I was like, man, if they're doing it, I should do it. What excuse do I have?
Right.
They're hardcore. Yeah.
Huh.
And there would be, just, yeah, like odd jobs, like second year people like, hey, I'm shooting this thing. We can pay you $200. Like, come on
Yeah.
out. And you would do that or, very
You
little.
have a little more
But
time in the second year to do things like that,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Thank God.
I tried to like, I wouldn't take things like maybe I skip like one or two class. It wasn't that much skipping, but it would be, you just had more time because you're like free time. Um, yeah. And, I do have like, I always felt like we could have shot two thesis film, and some people do, but as a course curriculum, it's like the editors, the size of the editing class, I think the cinematography class could match that editing class and still be like doing well. Um,
Right.
because in real life, our position is the shortest of all the heads of department on, hired day wise.
Sure. Yeah.
Editors work way longer than us. Production designers are usually brought on way before us. So, and they get wrap days and all that. And we come in, we're pretty, like the snipers or something. We just come in and get out. And so I
But
think the
you
second
do
year
have
is a
another.
little unrealistic in that
Yeah.
sense.
No, I agree with that. But you do it in the second year. You do have another big project, which is your 35 millimeter project, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And was that? I don't. It's hard to remember everyone's, but was yours like big? Did you direct it yourself?
Um, I did direct it. Yeah,
Oh,
I did direct it, but I
cool.
had like very narrow lanes. I wanted to do a spec commercial. I did a perfume spec commercial, and I just tried to
Smart.
like juice as much visual, things in there as possible.
Yeah. That's
And I
smart.
think
I don't know why no more people don't do that, because then now you have something, for your reel for a
yeah,
commercial agency, right?
right. And I think so yeah, going back to your question, I do think I was thinking of like work outside of, out after the second year.
Yeah.
And that was part of it. The MOS was like going to be something to put on my reel because I hadn't done any commercials um, before AFI really. I just done music videos and some short films,
Yeah.
and I'd done a horror feature um, in upstate New York, as you do.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
So you've done a feature.
very
Did,
small,
did
but
it ever come back like when you were up for your first feature? Like, oh, it's safe. He's safe. He did a feature before.
yes, for sure.
Oh,
I think
great.
it's the chicken and the egg with the features, I think, and
Yeah.
if you don't have one, it is tough. I think very tough unless you really knocked it out of the park with the short. And then, I think that like the way is either you knock it out of the park with the short and then that director gets an opportunity to do the feature and you're brought on. Like
Yeah.
no one wants to give you the first feature.
Yeah. But even with the short to the feature, depending on the size of the feature, sometimes it's a fight.
For sure. Yeah.
I don't know if you know, but the cinematographer that shot the Whiplash short is an AFI
Yeah.
alum.
I was there for his talk.
Oh, you were? Okay. So that's a hard story,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
and Damien Chazelle like fought for him until the very last second, and then producers wouldn't say yes, so he had to go with someone else who also was an AFI alum.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Very-
That's just coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have like a mentor as you were emerging, like an unofficial mentor, someone that was like showing you the ropes besides Stephen Lighthill?
Hmm. Um, I did, I made a connection with Masanobu,
Yeah,
um, who's also an AFI alum who had come in for one of the workshops. So he's kind of a mentor to me. But that's
and
there wasn't anyone specifically who was like come in under my wing and like, here's the ropes exactly.
right, but that's interesting, Masa, because the connection was he came in to speak, and that's where you met him.
Yeah. And I
So
just
why do you like, because that's hard to navigate sometimes, and
mhm.
like you don't want to be too pushy. He came in to teach a class. Like, how do you connect with someone so that you can follow up? How did that happen?
um I think I had taken some like BTS photos of the master class he had given us, and I had those. But what I really wanted to express to him was that, I don't know if it's still the same set at the mole stage, but there was a set at the mole stage where all of our like lighting classes during the second year were done, and it's the most brutal set stage ever to light. I mean, the thing is, it's just a proscenium, like a 180 proscenium kind of set stage, which is just whenever you light it, you're just lighting a cave. There's a wall and there's a person. It's like it's just there's no real like side walls to it and how to get a light into it. It's like very tough. It's a
Yep.
very tough lighting scenario to walk into. And he brought his gaffer, and the gaffer helped us all like place the lights and stuff, and it looked so good. Like he made it look like a movie. And it was like the first time I think one of our master classes, I was like, oh, this looks good. Like the way I liked it at least.
Yeah.
The other thing, it kind of felt like a TV set generally. But
Right.
like when he came in, he lit it like a movie, and I wrote him an email just like you crushed it. Thank you so much.
You had
Yeah,
his email.
yeah, I think yeah, we got his email.
So you sent him that with some of the pictures?
Yes,
Nice.
but and then
That's a good move. Yeah.
he agreed to get coffee with me one day, like after AFI, and very you can't ask anything of that kind of relationship. It's nice to know, if you like there. I was on a project last or in June, and I was going to Pittsburgh, and I knew he shoots a lot in Pittsburgh. I was like, hey, do you have any recommendations for people? And he was kind enough to pass someone along. So
That's cool. That's a professional relationship, right? What would that first coffee like? How did you navigate that? Like, what do you talk about?
yeah, no, it's something you're worried about.
Yeah.
He's like the most down to earth person, you know.
Yeah. He's
Um,
very
there's no
modest,
hair, very
yeah,
modest. So,
kind.
I think his kindness and warmth is it's easy to talk and just ask, like, like I definitely did homework and watched, whatever I had missed of his thing, and watched his first film, I think out of
Yeah.
AFI that was shot in Mexico. Like, I mean, his brilliance was there. Like, you see the first film, you're like, oh, this is not, someone who's just like figuring it out. It was there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you remember when going back to, because I don't know why, like the way you told the story, it's so cool. What he and his gaffer did to light that stage that made it go from TV to film?
Yeah. The thing that he did differently was that um he boxed the set in. So he brought in like I think a muslin topper over the set, which no
Hmm.
one was ever topping the set with a ceiling because it was just open to the air. And he
Right.
brought in this topper, and then he brought in some solids to cut all the any of the air, basically like the front of the set that's open to the class. He brought in solids and basically solided off the entire set, so it was a room at that point, like
Ah,
with the ceiling and the wall. And then I think he was using mole par beams, which are those like really intense hard um lights, and he put it way as far as back as he could and just like blasted it through the window, and um it just came in the room and floated around, bounced off the ceiling, and made it feel like a real room. I think it was like a bed scene or something. Yeah.
is that one of those light bulb moments where you're just like, oh yeah,
Yeah, it was definitely like, oh, like if you're faced with not a real set, just try to bring in as much reality as you can. Like, there wouldn't be an open air wall, and you wouldn't, be able to light this whole thing, with all these like crazy book lights and stuff, because that's
yeah,
just not what a room would feel like. And if you're in a room set, you should try to, like, that was sort of his idea, is like, I don't try to, make it fake. I try to make it as real as possible within the fake. Yeah.
that's great. That's great
Yeah.
advice. Okay, so you leave. You're done with
Mhm.
AFI.
Yeah.
What are the first steps? Like, how did the first jobs? Were they music videos when you first left?
There was a few music. There was definitely like a string of music videos. Um,
And how did those come about? You knew the directors or producers?
I think so through Santi. So this is again like why to be friends with everyone you can at AFI. Santi did an internship at Chromista, which is Darren Aronofsky's
Yeah,
um, commercial production company, and they liked the thesis film, and so he brought was like, I'll show you Chromista, like come on in and meet people, like and so I went there and met some of the executive producers there, and I met another producer who hires me to this day. Like years later, he started hiring me for commercial stuff. But one of the people there was a music video director, and she was kind of just getting started. And so I teamed up with her for quite a few music videos right after AFI.
And as a cinematographer, not as a gaffer, not as an operator.
Yeah, as a cinematographer.
And was that intentional? Were you thinking of that, of like, I'm not going to take any position below cinematographer because I need to build these credits and be seen as a cinematographer?
No, I mean, I was hustling. I was doing, I was gaffing things for other classmates they were shooting. I think I was operating whenever I could, and then I was shooting as whatever I could as well. Um, yeah, it was a hustle.
So you're doing everything,
Yeah.
but it, like, now looking back, it is important to be seen as a cinematographer, right? Otherwise, you could end up, it could, some people love that, but like you could stay a gaffer if you keep taking those gaffing jobs, right?
Yeah, I think so. And it's a great, like if you like gaffing, there's
Yeah,
nothing, at all. Like gaffers are amazing and they have a great career too.
right.
So yeah, I think there was always that thought of like, don't get stuck. And I still have a worry. If I do too many commercials, I'm like, I don't want to just be a commercial guy. If I do too many features, I'm like, I want to still have commercials. And so it's this worry of getting pigeonholed and trying to run three trains on three different tracks. It's a little tricky.
Yeah. Well, you seem to
And
do it because you do so many different kinds of things. But I have seen that happen. Yeah, even with like, you think like, a cinematographer that's like, oh, super successful because they shoot big budget studio horror movies. But you talk to them and they're like, yeah, I'm stuck in horror movies.
yeah,
They don't see me as I can do anything beyond that. And you get typecast even with in that role as cinematographer.
yeah, it's about, and it's tricky. And I think the further you go, it gets harder to meet people who give you that opportunity, even if you have a huge body of work or really high end work in some one place. It's like that doesn't necessarily mean you can shoot this great indie feature unless you've like sort of won festivals with your another indie feature. It's a tricky.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then to get those like first feature credits, always hard. Like we talked about,
Yeah.
one of your first ones is a movie called Saviors,
Yes.
which written and directed by your classmate Christopher Greenslate, who identified as a screenwriter at AFI, but
Yes.
we're all learning that he is much more than that.
Yeah. Again, just being friendly and making friends, and not that you're like, oh, everything's like this gold mine, gold digging thing, but it's just yeah, I don't know, seeing who you connect with.
Yeah, but like that's something where you don't have to go through a studio to get greenlit. Like he asked you to shoot the movie, right?
Yeah.
But very low budget. Also, a true oneer, right? A one shot, one take movie.
Yeah.
I mean, many takes, but
Yeah.
it's
5 takes. Yeah.
5 takes
5 takes. Seven attempts and five to the end. Yeah.
of an 85-minute movie,
Yeah. It
something like
was
that.
it was tough.
What is the prep for that?
Not enough.
Because on paper,
Um,
it's like, oh, we'll be done in a day.
I think there was
But
some
you don't
idea
make movies
of
on
that,
paper.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it was, as you said, a very, very small movie. I applaud Christopher for having the gumption to do it, because I was like, yeah, really? Like we did? He's like, no, I have this money from this grant. I'm gonna put it into this, and like I'm gonna stretch it over this amount of, this film. And
Yeah.
yeah, we just went into it and did it. So
And it, you must have had the conversation early on, like, does this have to be a oneer? Why does it have to be a oneer? Like classic,
mhm.
AFI cinematographers will challenge you on things.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning behind it?
The reason, you're dropped into this world of white supremacists and racists, and that was all kind of raw. I mean, this was before a certain president was elected in America, and so this story, sort of based on true events or that had happened recently in California, and I think, Warner, it's like hard to look away, or even if you do look away, it's still happening, it's still unfolding, and I think that aspect of it, it made sense that it should just be this kind of train wreck of a film story,
Yeah.
telling of a film where it's happening, and it feels it's visceral. That the Warner just gives you that reality, like you can feel that it's really going down, and there's mistakes and all sorts of things, but
Yeah.
we felt like the story and the subject matter was so, needed to be listened to, that sort of seat in that table would be good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's like nothing more visceral than like knowing that it's a oneer. And you operated?
I operated along with a classmate of mine, Jake McGee, who did good like 15% of the operating. There was a few handoffs.
So
So
there are handoffs in it. Okay. I was going to ask you like what,
yeah,
the endurance part of a 85-minute take and it's handheld.
it is handheld, and we had to pull our own focus. I think that's the worst
You had to
part of it.
pull your own focus. I didn't know that.
Yeah, because once there was no wireless, it was just there was a film called Victoria out of Berlin that I reached out to the cinematographer actually came to AFI while I was there, and I reached out to
Mm,
him. He kind of gave me the lowdown of like what he had done, like a C300 battery, dual cards, like this whole thing. And if
yeah.
you have wireless, you're eating batteries. You're starting to put a gold mount on it. It becomes much heavier and bigger. So we just
Uh,
basically just strip down the camera, internal battery, no wireless, and just like
right.
knob follow focus.
And is it a zoom lens or are you on a fixed
No,
lens?
so
No,
prime, yeah,
you're on a prime lens. Okay. So you have one focal length the whole time.
yeah,
You're running focus.
yeah.
Uh, wow. Were some of the retakes like, I mean, that must have been, well, you tell me, what's the hardest part about this?
Um, I think it was for me, the hardest part was just the timing, because there's so many, it's a dance, and so the timing of it, I kind of wish we had a few more takes, like the budget to do a few more days, I guess, of
Mm-hmm.
it. But
Because you're basically one of the cast members when you're doing this, right? As
totally,
as the
yeah,
like, as the cinematographer. Yeah.
yeah. It was an very interesting experience, in that it's the closest I've ever been to being in a movie, because
Yeah.
it's happening. It's not like 2 minutes and cut and like makeup comes in and does touch ups. It's like you're there, and as the camera operator, you're living it with them, and they're screaming at it's like racial slurs and all this stuff, and it's super intense.
Yeah.
It's
And you have to
definitely
hit marks and you have to kind of like not really know your lines, but know your blocking, right? When you're where you're turning the camera.
somewhat. It was
Somewhat.
very like fluid, in every time was a slightly different. There was enough, like the way we lit the spaces. There was enough kind of, they could do what they wanted, and you're kind of making just a flowing decision as it's unfolding, of like, go to the right, go to the left, like, oh, that's a moment, like get into this, and you would find similar frames as it each take. You'd
Yeah.
kind of hit some spaces, but it wasn't so. Christopher wanted to really capture just like the rawness of it. So we rehearsed the first half of it and never rehearsed the second half of it.
Oh,
Yeah. He
interesting.
just wanted it to play out. Like once it got to the second half where it just all goes crazy, he wanted the actors not to get too like in their heads. They were all sort of younger actors or kind of non-actors. So
Yeah. So even
it,
for you, like
that was tough.
operating, being there, like in that second half, the first take, that was your first time experiencing it.
Yeah. And everybody's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, when you like the one that's in the movie, when people watch the movie,
Yeah.
did you know when you got it, when you did that take?
Um, we were pretty happy with that one. Yeah. It was between the second to the last one and the last one. Um, and I think we went with the second to the last one. And I think that we all were like, okay, that felt like the best one we had done. Um,
Yeah.
and then when we did the last one, it also felt pretty good. So we were getting they were getting good, but I think There was a few just emotional acting things that
Yeah.
Christopher, he felt like the second to last one was the better one.
How long were the resets between quote takes?
So I think, we did 2 nights of shooting, and I believe we did 2 full takes on the first night, and then we got through 3 full takes on the second night. And I think it was the first take of the first night, we got to the end, the finale house, and the van that was supposed to show up didn't show up with full of like goons. And so apparently they were getting blood makeup done, and the makeup artist didn't really realize that like we were shooting it as a oneer or something. So that was a
Oh
fail.
man.
We were just like, cut. Actually, we tried to save it and like run back in the house, and then it was like it just took too long, and they didn't show up, and that
Yeah.
was it.
God, that's a
And
bummer. Yeah.
one of the takes, so it's like, I mean, it wasn't crazy like Victoria where I mean, there's like 15 or 20 locations in Victoria. Ours had,
Yeah.
I think, 7-ish, but it's like a street to a house, back into a van, driving around, like stopping at some parking lot thing, and then, driving back to the house and then going to another house. Like that was sort of the run.
Yeah.
And one of the ones on the second day, probably the first take on the second day, the person driving the van got lost in Santa Clarita. It's nighttime, and we staged this like kicking someone out of the van and getting shot, like instead of at a dirt lot that we had planned out, it was outside of like a Papa John's or something. It was just like it was, people must
Oh,
have
you
just been like,
probably
what
got
is
some
happening?
real reactions in the background there. Yeah.
And so we shoot them. The guy, like, our characters run off with the van now, leaving those people at the Papa John's instead of at the dirt lot. And then no one knew where we were, and we couldn't navigate ourselves back to where we were supposed to get to in the time period that fit the film. And so we had to just call cut then.
Yeah. So some logistics errors. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But,
wild.
making it to the end of 5, like I was really worried, like you're saying, about being tired, but it actually was pretty energizing, and it felt like they were happening like faster and faster each take, and it wasn't as like physically demanding.
Yeah. There's adrenaline. There's the adrenaline of like, we're doing this. Like, there's also the camaraderie of doing it, right?
I think there was also like a little less like adrenaline. The adrenaline drains you out. And so after the first take, I was like, oh my God, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this again. But like you get used to it, and yeah, so by the end it was sort of like, oh, we're done. Like that was weird. Like it felt really fast. I mean, literally they
Yeah.
felt like 35 minutes long each take. It was like, oh my God, we're already here. Like it's a wild experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not really an actor, but I was in this like 25-minute one shot Western. I have a small part, but I come in at the end, like in the last 5 minutes, and it's just so nerve wracking because you don't want to be the guy that screws it up, And
Totally.
so you know when they start, right? And then you're just waiting and waiting and anticipating, and like that just makes it worse. So I
Yeah.
kind of get the feeling of like the end, towards the end of the movie,
Mhm.
screw up. I have a lot of empathy for that person. Um, I have you have so much that you've shot. You have so much to talk about. Uh, but I did want to talk, a little bit about Saviors. But tell us what's like coming up. You probably have multiple things finished in the can.
Mm. There was, so after the pandemic, I had a pretty good run of features that I think were bottled up because of the pandemic, and most of them are out now. Um, so there's one that's pending sale still
Okay.
that a classmate from AFI, Raz, did.
Oh
And
yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
so that one's pending, hasn't come out yet.
I
But
mean,
all
this
the rest,
shows, by the way, just quick pause to say like how well loved you are, not just through your work, but like you've worked with so many of your classmates on features, right? So we said Christopher and Faraz and Santiago. Who am I missing? Probably more.
I think that of the AFI, yeah, that was, um, yeah. But
That's pretty good.
with
That's like
Jessica, when she was
rare.
kind of directing some shorts, I did
Yeah.
a few shorts with Jessica, and yeah, no, I'm super grateful and lucky to be asked. I mean, it's it's tough. It's tough to, to be asked. And yeah, and I've done some more shorts with Christopher Greenslate as well, like
Yes.
since the feature, and you know, yeah, it's
And they're wild. They're really like kind of, I don't want to say experimental, but like when you two get together, like you don't do a traditional film, which I love.
yeah, I mean that's it's all really the writing and the directing though. To be honest, like the premise and also like the way they want to tell it, I think at least I'm not the cinematographer who just comes in and is like, well, this is what I do, it's gonna be dark, it's gonna be blue. Like
Yeah.
I do want to like work and hear and craft something that they're seeing. I mean, they're the boss, and the writing is the writing. And if it's set, I did a movie all in a white room, then the movie's in the white room. Like there's no, but I only shoot dark rocks on the beach or something. Like that's not that movie, then you can't choose it
Yeah.
if you only do that.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we're shooting is the director's choice, and where did they push to shoot, or what set, or what location, or those things. Those are a lot of times out of my hand.
Yeah. But
So
in that, you must love that challenge because you take these on, and in that challenge, you're growing every time, right? You're learning things.
yeah, no, the challenge is I do enjoy a challenge more than a non-challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we're gonna bring this to a close. I'll ask three quick questions.
Yeah.
Did film school prepare you for the quote real world that you're thriving in now?
um I think so. I mean, when I look back, it's like the contacts, like there's a before and after the AFI for sure. Um, Not that it's the only way at all, and people I know who didn't do that path have had amazing success. So, but for me at least, it definitely, yeah, I don't know, prepare is a tricky word because it is
Mhm.
different than school when you're in the
Yeah.
real world. There's things that are easier, there's things that are harder, but um, but definitely the networking and the connections and sort of, yeah, that kind of pool of people that who can help you out. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's such a unique industry, right? That you go into that what could prepare you for it? Because every job has a different challenges or unique, things you have to deal with. So it's like there is no one thing that could, train you for everything other than
Right.
maybe just be cool. Like, don't stress out. You'll figure it out.
I mean, I honestly like every project that I get, I feel like I know less. I don't know. I've heard other people talk about this, but I on it genuinely feel like, I started this feature documentary or a series, mini series, and I just like felt so I didn't know, like, was I going to be able to get an exposure? Like literally, like the doubt was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what is all this amounted to that I literally have less ability to figure this out? But you figure it out. But it's like I think that's a good feeling. Is like going into a project where you're just like, oh my God, like how should this be, and crafting that, and you have ideas, but you really don't know until that first frame goes up.
Yeah.
Did
No,
you
that's good. Yeah. Don't lose that. The second you go into a project and you're like, I got this. Let's shoot this in my sleep.
No,
That's when,
that's the danger. Like
yeah.
I honestly, like if I'm sleeping well before a shoot, there's something wrong. Like that you're phoning it in, at least to me.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I like that take. All right. Two last things.
Yeah.
Piece of equipment that you rely on that you love. That's, equipment could be equipment like a piece of gear or software or something. And then a piece of advice. So two
Okay.
pieces. It's like left brain,
Mm,
right brain.
okay. I mean, this is a bad one, but I think the gear that I rely on at the moment is always pushing for the best camera possible. Even if it's not the most practical. I've been, shooting pretty exclusively on Arri Alexas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, film is also great, but not every project, you can't do a 4 hour interview on film these days necessarily. Maybe you can if some people are doing it, um, but I've always sat there when I've used a good, like the camera that I wanted to use on a project, and you look around, there's all these people hired, there's so much work, it's all this talent, all this, locations and all these things. And you're like, this would suck if we were shooting it on a lesser camera. Like, why? Like, it becomes a much
Yeah.
smaller portion of it. And those cameras, at least to me, just make it just really just much better feeling.
Yeah.
And it's not,
That's a good point. You put so much effort and time and energy and resources into making this film. Don't skimp on the most important part.
yeah. And, as a DP, you're sitting next to the camera a lot, 12 hours a day. And do you want to just be sitting behind a camera that you're like, I wish we were on that one?
No.
Like for 12 hours a day for 20 days, 30 days. It's like
That's
at
many
least,
hours of regret. Yeah.
yeah. And then, um, you know, and that's just my take, but people making all sorts of things look amazing, including iPhones. So but that's one of the things I just every time I push for it, I look back and I'm like, thank gosh, we pushed for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And advice, hmm, yeah,
Like
I don't
either
know.
how to navigate film school
Yeah.
or your post film school life.
Um, so I think that, and this might not be that popular, but thinking about your personal finances post film school, and just, you know, I mean, I've come to the point where I feel like now with the pandemic and the strikes and things, and just it is a bumpy ride out there. And so having some sort of, and this might not be possible for everyone, but like keeping in mind, and I think, Robert Ellsworth, when he came to AFI with Nightcrawler while I was there, he kind of mentioned a similar thing is like, have a thick financial cushion for yourself so that you can weather the dry spots. Or you can also take the like lesser paying jobs, and Lauren Gutierrez was just on, I was listening to her podcast and she was talking about like the more you work, the less you're paid. It's the inverse scale of like you're working harder, you're getting paid less. Like commercials, you're
Yeah.
working less, you're getting paid more.
Yeah.
Um, and so, Robert Ellsworth was saying like, don't become locked into like, I need to get commercial rates on everything because you'll never have the ability to like take an indie with deferred pay or, and like indies just don't, you're not going to make a living on that. So
Right.
having some sort of financial plan that you can weather it because there's a lot of peaks and valleys
Yeah.
and more valleys than peaks maybe for a long time.
That's just right now. It's just momentary, little downturn.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I
But
remember
I
he
think
also
just
said,
having a, that like, yeah, because I think one thing that's different in the real world, or at least for me, is that in like an AFI, you go in 2 years, you go in every day, there's something to do, you're busy, there's like clear objectives, um, you have clear dates of things, or
there's structure. Your world is,
there's a structure
yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
busy, and I think once you get out, um, you're not always busy, at least I'm not. There's lots of time, and you got to kind of figure out what to do with that, you know.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
How do you
but
how do you fill that time?
that's
Yeah.
unless there's like the 0.01% who just they're like packed out and get an agent while they're at AFI and they're just super hot and are loaded from stepping out of AFI like every day, every week there's a job or something, but I haven't experienced that. And even
And
though
you're
you say
someone that
I've been
works a
busy,
lot. You're someone that works a lot.
it doesn't, I mean, like the reality is like you have a year, it's 52 weeks. Like a movie, you could shoot 2 movies and that, technically could take you 6 weeks out of the year, maybe 7. Like
That's
could be
true.
more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, most indie features are 3 weeks long. And maybe you have 2 weeks of prep on that. That's 5 weeks out of 50.
Right. Oh, geez.
It's like pretty like narrow, like you're working crazy during those 5 weeks, but then it's
So you
over.
should be shooting 10 indies a year if you're in the indie world.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe people like, but there is this time, and it's people like, oh, but it's nice, like you're off of work, and I'm like, it's not necessarily a vacation when you're not working.
Yeah,
You're,
right. If you don't know when the next job's coming, if you're, yeah, you don't know what the
yeah,
next paycheck will be, Yeah, I get it. I'm more, yeah. My mentality is with yours.
So I think that like, having that financial sort of saving, like trying to work up at least to that, like having that so that you can weather it. Because a
Yeah.
lot of people drop out of it, I think, and there's lots of ways, but just leaving it because it is tough,
Yeah.
and the people that seem to kind of get through it are people that figure out, either like side hustles or I don't know, things that kind of can keep you over. Um, yeah, while
Yeah. That's good
I would
advice.
say only, yeah, I don't know. I don't even know. Like I look back and I'm like, I don't know, how did I do it? I have 3 kids now.
You have
And
3 now?
yeah,
How?
yeah, raising them in LA. Like, I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, and you live in LA. That is
But it's like, like thank you to everybody that's ever hired me. Like, to be honest, like every single one mattered.
yeah.
Even if it's
Yeah.
not on the reel or whatever, it's like every single one matters. So grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll end with the other thing that Ellswood said when he was here. I don't know if it was for that one, but it was in the smaller theater. He did a smaller talk, and I
Nice.
remember he said he was like, "Don't get divorced. Don't get divorced because then you'll take every comic book job that comes your way because you're doing it for a paycheck."
I mean, I
And I
remember he arrived in like some 1992 Saab, and and he made a point. He's like, I'm not driving a Porsche. Like, I
yeah,
got this car. I've kept it. Like the wheels are still on it, and I thought that was cool. Like, there's a
yeah,
certain grit, and I think that having a bit of that grit helps you out because everyone says like no matter what the size of budget you're working with, you have to kind of be gritty in
yeah,
film there, and maybe that's part of why I've been lucky to like get like people know that I'm like kind of gritty. Like I'll go and design, like build something or do whatever whatever, yeah, like get it done somehow.
yeah, yeah,
Versus like what we call like white glove, which is just like, oh, this is the way. Like I need a techno crane. There's no other like this is the way. So like we need to spend the 8,000 on the techno crane today. And maybe you
It does
can.
it's just more satisfying too when you're like in it, doing it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for spending the time. And all right, man. Be well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sorksy. Talk soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into the After Film School podcast. If you're interested in supporting the show, please reach out to us. For more information and to join the conversation, visit our group Telegram channel, After Film School Podcast, where you can ask follow-up questions and engage with our community. The link is in the description. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at After Film School Podcast. We truly appreciate your support and look forward to connecting with you again soon. With gratitude, the After Film School Podcast team, Chris and Renee.